Great. So we're just going to record just in case folks that couldn't make it in person today want to review the recording later. So this is the Massachusetts Food System Collaborative's briefing for advocates on our local food system legislative and budget priorities. My name is Becca Miller. I'm our policy director, and I'm so glad to see so many familiar names and faces in the chat and some new ones. Welcome. I'm really excited to do this in partnership with many of our statewide policy partners who you'll be hearing from shortly. Just a friendly reminder to mute yourself if you're not on mute and to introduce yourself in the chat. So I want to start out by acknowledging there's been a lot of chaos and uncertainty at the federal level. We are watching this at the collaborative. It has been on our radar. I hope everyone is taking care of themselves as you are able to and reminding yourself to take a deep breath as the news is rapidly developing every day, it seems like. But we strongly believe in our mission of supporting a sustainable, equitable, resilient, and connected local food system. And if folks are having any issues, as we mentioned in our newsletter, with drawing down a federal grant, we would ask you to reach out to your U.S. senator and federal representative to get their constituent services folks aware of that issue. So we know that there's been a lot of developments and it's something that we'll continue to monitor. And today we're going to talk mostly about state policy, but I want everyone in the room to know that there are a lot of folks that are presenting today that are really strongly advocating at the federal level, and they're a wonderful resource for us all. So just to clarify what a food system is, I think many folks have seen this graph that I've shared many times. We're going to be talking about many different issues today, from food production, distribution and aggregation, processing, purchasing power, of course, and all the way to resource and waste recovery. And I like to add this green circle on the diagram just to make it clear that public policy at every level, from local all the way to federal, including state, affects our local food system. So we are officially in the 194th session of the General Court, or the legislature in Massachusetts. So far, just a quick update, we've had 7,000 bills filed just so far. There are always the opportunity to introduce them late, even though the bill filing deadline was January 17th. The House and the Senate are still determining their rules for this session, so that's why you haven't seen, committees being formed yet. They have to figure out their rules, and then they will appoint those. In previous sessions, there has been a co-sponsorship deadline. There hasn't been one announced as far as I have seen, so that gives folks some time to review bills that they want to add their names to in support of. And then we have a deadline for bills to be moved out of their first committee by tentatively February 4th of 2026, although that is potentially subject to change depending on how the rules process and debate goes between the chambers. And then, of course, formal session ends on July 31st of the second year of the session. So that's when bills are technically supposed to be moved for passage out by, but that doesn't necessarily prevent things happening from what's called informal session from August to December of the second year. And then, of course, we also have our annual budget process that happens every year. So some key dates, we expect some hearings of the Ways and Means or the Budget Committee to be happening in March. House debate in April, Senate debate in May, and then theoretically the governor is supposed to sign the budget by June 30th, although there's an asterisk there because that's been late in several recent sessions. So hopefully that will happen by June 30th, but we will see. And so without further ado, I will pass it over to Pat Baker first from Mass Law Reform Institute to talk about her work.
Hi, good morning, everybody. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Becca, Christina, and the Mass Food Systems Collaborative. It's just, we need you all right now, and we need each other. So just really thrilled and, well, not thrilled, but very glad to be in Massachusetts and working together with all you. Things are very tough in other states. Mass Law Reform is a statewide poverty law center. We work the local legal services offices. We cover about 8 different areas of poverty law. I focus a lot on food security issues. And as Becca said, we are hyper-focused on what's happening at the federal level, and are working with our national partners to protect and defend SNAP, child nutrition, and other federal programs that could be cut in order to fund a border wall or give tax breaks to the wealthy. So very, very concerned about that. But at the same time, we are pushing forward to protect access to federal benefits here in Massachusetts. So one bill that's been filed by Senator Michael Moore and Rep. Reina DeRosa would be to ensure that the state really maximizes access to federal benefits, which are 100% federally funded by Congress, by USDA. Only 50%, Massachusetts gets 50% reimbursement for running the program, the caseworkers and processing it. We have seen, and I'll go to the next slide in a minute, but we've seen a dramatic denial or loss of SNAP eligibility among families with children in particular in the last 6 months who've not been able to get through the mandatory interview process. And we're asking the legislature to direct the Executive Office of Health and Human Services to identify what they need in order to maximize benefits and improve customer service. Sometimes the agencies don't really ask what they truly need because they're given a benchmark by the governor's office as to how much they can spend. And we're seeing the impact of that with a high number of denials right now. The other bill that we are working on is with Senator Robin Kennedy and Rep. Sally Cairns. That, I don't know if people are aware of the amount of theft of skimming by organized criminal rings in Massachusetts who are literally using information from point of sale devices to steal benefits from SNAP recipients. Congress had authorized replacement of the stolen benefits, but that ended December 20th. And now we're seeing the continued exploitation of low-income families, older adults, people with disabilities whose SNAP benefits are being stolen. Ideally, we'd have chip tap options in Massachusetts. California has just started to use the chip tap option, which is a protection on the EBT card. You may notice your credit and debit cards have chip tap protection. SNAP has always never had the same protections as other forms of payment. So what we're hoping for is that this legislation will authorize, will require the Healy administration to pursue and provide about $1 million a month is what we're seeing right now in stolen benefits until we can get either Congress to restore this and also move towards the protections. Next slide, Becca. So I just wanted to share with you the data on the first slide I mentioned, which is the drop in the SNAP caseload, disproportionately impacting families with children. And that's because older adults, persons with severe disabilities are on longer certification periods, about 3 years, but working families, households with kids tend to be on shorter 1-year certification periods, and they're falling off. And this decline has been very distressing for us to see. We hear from SNAP outreach providers all the time. This is very problematic. And so we want just to record, we want to be able to get more specific information from the state as to what they need to do their job. We're not blaming them. They don't have enough staff. And then finally, I'll just say we are very much supportive of the HIP program. And I didn't list it here because I know others will speak to that. And we are working very closely with the Greater Boston Food Bank, Western Mass Food Bank, MassPIRG on a hunger-free campus initiative, and are working very much to support that. And as things evolve in Congress, we may be gearing up a separate campaign to protect immigrants' benefits who may ultimately lose them on the federal level. So those are the issues we're working on right now. But thank you, Becca, for hosting this. I think I'm within my 5 minutes.
Thanks, Pat. And next we'll go to Celica Bulger Medina from Project Bread.
Good morning. Thank you. And thank you again, Becca, for putting this together. Good morning, everyone. My name is Celica Bulger Medina, and I am Director of Government Affairs at Project Bread, which is a statewide nonprofit that focuses on supporting federal nutrition programs such as SNAP and Summer Eats. For this legislative session, we have a combination of like some key budget priorities and also more traditional legislation. The first of which is continued state investment in the School Meals for All program, which provides universal meals for all K-12 students throughout the state, regardless of income. This program is really impactful and really popular. Participation rates continue to increase. During the past academic year, over 12 million more lunches were served just in that one academic year. And it's also helping to spur local economic activity because it's empowering school districts to purchase more locally sourced ingredients for meals. For example, local apples from local orchards, or using local dairy companies for milk cartons, things like that. So it's directly investing money back into our local agricultural sectors. Um, we Because of the federal landscape, I'm not going to dive into that, but because of the federal landscape, we also anticipate having opportunities to engage in advocacy for school meals for all at the national level, with proposed cuts to federal spending and modifications to provisions that are related to the National School Lunch Program, like the community eligibility provision. Um, we we will be watching that closely and advocating in support of this program, both at the state and federal level, where and when appropriate. The next priority is the Healthy Incentives Program, and I don't want to steal from uh, Beck, so I'll just give you like a quick highlight. But basically, for folks who don't know, the Healthy Incentives Program, known as HIP, it provides greater access for SNAP beneficiaries to locally grown fruits and vegetables, and at the same time, boosting the local agricultural sector. It's basically a match program. So for dollars spent at a local food farmers market or something like that, they get money back on their EBT card. Like I said, I don't want to steal that from Becca and her team, so I'll leave it at that. But on that front, we'll be supporting both budget line items in support of this program and legislation to make it a permanent program. Um, Next, we'll be advocating for continued investment in the food source hotline. Project Bread is a contracted partner of the Department of Transitional Assistance to operate the food source hotline, which is the only statewide confidential and toll-free call center, which connects residents to food resources in their communities. So, for example, we do screenings over the phone for SNAP and for SNAP eligibility. And we also help process applications over the phone and follow up with applicants throughout the process. And in addition to that, we also refer folks to more emergency or immediate food resources directly in their communities, like food pantries and food banks. Um, and again, in this climate, uh, maintaining funding for the food source hotline will be critical as households navigate the changing landscape in federal nutrition programs, such as, for example, there could be changes in federal work reporting rules and any additional changes that may come from, for example, the Farm Bill and just the new administration in general. There's a lot of uncertainty there. So this hotline is critical in helping households navigate that uncertainty. The next priority is another budget item, which is the Child Nutrition Outreach Program. We're a contracted partner with DESE to expand access and participation in the Summer Eats program, which provides summer lunches and breakfast to kids throughout the summer to fill the gap in between. Thank you, Christina. In between over the summer outside of the academic year where they would normally get universal school lunch. It helps fill that gap. So we help get sponsors set up throughout the state to run Summer Eats programs. And we also help school districts like implement things like breakfast after the bell, and we provide like one-on-one support for outreach, promotion, and also even meal prep for school districts. And last but not least, the Hunger Free Campus Initiative would provide grants for universities to address food insecurity with their student population. Hunger doesn't stop once you've graduated high school. So making investments in programming and awareness campaigns on campuses throughout the state will be critical. So we're also supporting that as a budget item and legislation. Did I make it?
Thanks, Elika. We'll go next to Kate Adams with the Greater Boston Food Bank.
Thanks, Becca. Hi, everyone. Kate Adams, she, her, Greater Boston Food Bank. We are really proud to be working in partnership with all of the amazing advocates and organizations you're hearing from today. So thanks for the opportunity to share. So GBFB, we are serving 70% of the state's food insecure population. We're one of 4 food banks in Massachusetts. We provide food for 600 community-based organizations, up from the New Hampshire border, out to Framingham, down to the Cape and Islands. Our partners are reporting serving over 2 times than what they did before the pandemic. About 80% of the food that those partners are distributing to the community comes from the Greater Boston Food Bank, much of which is at no cost. A growing amount of that food is produce, culturally responsive food. So proud to be moving the needle on that. And our 2 top policy priorities, primarily we're focusing on a budget campaign for MEFAP, which is the Massachusetts Emergency Food Assistance Program. This is funding in the state budget that the 4 food banks get to buy food to support all of our agency partners in the community. Over half of that funding goes right back into the community for purchasing food from local farmers and fishermen in Cape Cod. So really great economic stimulus piece. In that, we have a big budget ask this year. That's a significant increase in what we received last year at 55.5 million, but we're just seeing the demand not letting up. So that's reflective of the growing need across our networks. I was just on a call with our agency partners this week, and I'll share a few stats. A pantry up in Lawrence shared 220 new households registered for food in January, which is pretty on par with the number of new visitors that they've been receiving in the past year. Up in Salem, they reported 376 new households registering for food last month at the Salem Pantry. Catholic Charities across Greater Boston reported 759 new households. So as you can tell, really trying to do everything we can to support all those partners in meeting the needs. Our secondary state level policy priority is the Hunger-Free Campus Initiative, which Pat and Celica had mentioned. GBFB works in partnership with the Food Bank of Western Mass and Mass Law Reform Institute to advance a budget campaign and a legislative campaign to pass a bill that would make permanent this grant program that allows community colleges and public universities around the state to access funds and advance hunger relief programming on campus. Schools have done phenomenal projects with this funding, and we really need to sustain that. So that is all from me, and I will turn it over to the next.
Thanks, Kate. And next we'll go to Laura Sylvester with the Food Bank of Western Mass.
Oh, I know.
Is Jean not here?
Jean is here, but isn't presenting, so.
Okay, sorry about that. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Laura Sylvester, the Public Policy Manager at the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts. So our food bank covers the western third of the state, the 4 counties in Hampden, Hampshire, Franklin, and Berkshire. We just to confirm that we are also seeing enormous increases in people coming to our member agencies. The last time we did this presentation last month was for new legislators, and when I went to update my statistics and check, the number of people we served has gone up 20,000 by 20,000. So that's about a 20% increase. We're seeing about an average of 141,558 people per month. And just to give you some perspective on that, the whole 10 years pre-COVID, our numbers were around 90,000 a month. So COVID caused a huge spike. then it went down a little bit, and then it's just been going up ever since the last 2 years. And I not 100% sure what's driving those numbers, whether it's just costs and inflation, or whether it's like Pat was saying, people losing SNAP benefits, and so they're having to turn to other resources. But whatever it is, we're seeing a huge need. Emily, my colleague Emily Reardon, and I, who is on this call, we are heading to DC in a few weeks as part of a Feeding America fly-in, talking to members of Congress, really trying to protect SNAP benefits, and also funding for food banks on the federal level. So there's great work being done at the federal level. Today, we're just talking about state level stuff. We work very closely in partnership, as others have said, with the wonderful people on this call. But to avoid repetition, I'm going to talk about two priorities. The first is the Bridge to Prosperity Cliff pilot. The cliff effect is what happens when people who are in lower income jobs that still allow them to receive benefits like SNAP or housing take a slight raise or get a new job and get a little bit of a bump in income, causes them to lose their benefits because they hit the threshold, and then they end up worse off than they were before. This is a huge problem for thousands of people, not just in Massachusetts, but millions of people throughout the country. We have a pilot that tries to ameliorate the impacts of cliffs. So we have people that we're enrolling, getting them involved in coaching, job coaching. They're getting paid cash amounts each month to make up for loss of any benefits as they are training for new jobs that are going to pay them a livable wage. After 2 years of being in this program, there's a completion bonus of about $10,000. This passed in December 2022 as part of an economic development bill. Happy to say that we are finally enrolling our first people in this pilot. It's very exciting. And we were asking for $100,000 in the FY26 budget, which is nowhere near what we need to run this pilot. But we know it's a really tough budget year. We're also doing a lot of fundraising and grant writing to get some private funding for this as well. But hope that you'll help us to support by also asking for this money in the budget. And then transportation, lack of access to transportation is a huge impact on people's ability to access food. So we are doing a lot of advocacy around regional transit authorities. Thanks to the Fair Share Amendment, the amount of funding for the RTAs has gone up significantly. Because that funding stream is really secure, we're asking for $250 million in the FY26 budget for the regional transit authorities. And just to give some perspective, the regional transit authorities serve all of the areas outside of the MBTA coverage area. So the MBTA coverage, Greater Boston, and then the RTAs, there's 15 of them, and then they serve the rest of the state. So we're asking for $250 million to cover all of the state RTAs, $8 million for community transit funding. And then I also run a Western Mass Transportation Advocacy Network, which is a group of people we meet monthly to talk about transportation-related issues. We focus primarily on Western Mass, but are open to anyone. If you're interested, I'll put the link to that in the chat. You can sign up and come to our meetings. We have one tomorrow is our next meeting, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. All are welcome. And we also are planning a forum on April 11th in Springfield at La Quinta, and all are welcome to come to that as well. And then, of course, our other priorities are listed there, but I won't take up any more time. And I'll turn it to the next person.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Alexis Walls from the Mass Public Health Alliance.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. My name is Alexis Walls, and I work with the Mass Public Health Alliance. And Laura, I'm so glad I get to go after you. I love it when I'm in another meeting where somebody else is beating the drum around regional transit. So yay, go transit equity. So for those who are not familiar, MPHA, our organization, is a small statewide nonprofit that does public health policy advocacy in Massachusetts. habits. And so we care about all of these sort of things that impact health in communities. So, Laura just talked about transportation. We're in alignment with the Food Bank of Western Mass on that work. But we also care a lot about sustainable food systems, which is what brings me here today. And I want to talk specifically about one program that we are advocating for. But I do just want to flag that we support a lot of the other work that folks in this space are doing, and just want to thank you all for your leadership. So the program I want to talk to you about is the Mass Food Trust Program, which is a program that provides loans and grants to healthy food retailers in low-income, low-food access communities. This program actually started with seed funding from the state in 2018, which has been leveraged to bring in additional investments, and is currently administered by two community development financial institutions, the local Enterprise Assistance Fund and the Franklin County CDC. And so there are two things that we're really advocating for this year that I want to share with you all, and hope that you can join us in. One is that we are hoping to get a bond reauthorization for the food trust. This reauthorization would allow for the state to draw down dollars to support LEAF and FCCDC in providing those grants and loans to food retailers. And we're actually advocating for this through the environmental bond bill, which I know other folks are advocating for as well. Other people are kind of hoping to get things around food priorities in the bond bill. And this is one that we are certainly advocating for. We're hoping to get 10 million that would allow the program to draw down up to 2 million per year. And so that is one thing that we're hoping for to really support the capital needs for the program. The other thing that we are actually advocating for this year is state funding, state operating funding for the program. So prior to FY25, the program was receiving around $300,000 per year in the annual state budget. And this money really went towards supporting operating, and so helping LEAF and FCCDC and actually staffing the program and doing things like providing business assistance, which has led to the continued success of many of the retailers that have received support from the program. Governor Healy actually reduced the line for this program in her line item reductions for FY25, which cut the program operating funds from the state by 1/3. And so we're hoping to get that restored in FY26 and are advocating for $300,000. Just to give you an understanding about the program and the impact it's had, you all can see the map that's on the screen in front of you. This program has been able to support retailers in many communities across the state. So it really has had a statewide impact and helped to increase food access to over 418,000 individuals in Massachusetts. I just have kind of zoomed in on two communities in particular that I wanted to share a little bit more about. So for example, just giving an urban example of the impact this program has had, New Bedford has actually been able to experience an increase in food access across 4 projects through the Mass Food Trust Program. These 4 projects have increased healthy food access to over 40,000 individuals in New Bedford. And more specifically, you can see in the map in communities that are low income, low food access. The program has helped create 90 jobs in that city, and then has dispersed around 400,000 in investments. Another example that I want to provide that's more rural is Bernardston, Massachusetts. For those who are not familiar, this is a town that has a senior population of over 50%, many of whom use SNAP. And in this community, there really is only one store where folks can actually buy fresh groceries, and that is a store that the Food Trust has been able to support with funding. Without this program being able to expand some of its infrastructure to provide healthy, affordable food, the closest full-service grocery store would be in Greenfield, which is about 6.5 miles away. And given what Laura was just sharing earlier about transportation challenges, we know that that is tough tough, especially for older adults. And so just to give you a sense of the type of impact this program really has, we are hoping to see many more investments through the Mass Food Trust program, but we need to see both capital support and operating support that can come through the state budget and also environmental bonds. So that's what we're advocating for this year. I will put my email address in the chat for anybody who wants to follow up and learn more. And it will also add our newsletter in case you would like to learn about how you can take action on these things. Thanks so much.
Thanks. And next we'll go to Simca Horowitz with Mass Farm to School.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for having me. I'm Simca Horowitz, co-director at Massachusetts Farm to School. Really great to be here with everyone and echo a lot of the sentiments about supporting many of the other legislative and budget priorities that have already been discussed, particularly around universal meals, which is very related to the work that our advocacy coalition, Massachusetts Food for Massachusetts Kids, undertakes related to supporting the use of healthy local food in school meals and also providing students experiential food education. So we have one priority bill this session. In the past session, we had sort of two different bills that in some ways have been kind of combined into one this year, an act establishing the Massachusetts Farm to School program. So what this bill would do is really codify two existing kind of pilot programs. The Massachusetts Fresh Grant, which is a farm to school grant program administered by DESE, that is available both for K through 12 schools and for early education programs. So that's one of the things that's really exciting about this effort, is that it's really expanding access to healthy and local foods for our youngest eaters. So it would codify the Farm to School Fresh Grant to make this a more permanent program. This has been tremendously popular. We've had funding the past few years, and in the most recent round of applications, they had well over $3 million worth of requests come in for about $500,000 in available funding. So more than 6 times the available funds. There's tremendous demand. The grant program can support both infrastructure investments, things like kitchen equipment to support scratch cooking, school garden installation, but also what we really understand to be essential in terms of professional development, both for school nutrition staff and for educators, so that they can make the best use of these programs and really feel comfortable and confident in the work they're doing with students. And the other element of this program or of the bill is around a local food incentive, which provides schools additional funds specifically to spend on locally purchased food. So again, there is currently a program called Northeast Food for Schools funded with federal funds that are intended to be renewed. We'll see what actually transpires with that, but are hopeful there may still be some federal funding coming into this program. But this would sort of set some parameters around it and really make it a state program, regardless of whether there are these federal funds available. We know that often it's difficult for local producers to compete with products that are conventionally available, and we've seen really tremendous investment in local farms and food hubs when schools are actually given the resources to make those purchases. And we just want to make sure that the school food dollars are being invested back into the local economy. So that's what the local food incentive does. So that's the bill. We also will be making a budget ask to provide level funding for the Mass Fresh Grant program within DESE that was funded at $750,000 the last fiscal year. So I can also drop in, we have an action alert that recently went out about asking for co-sponsors for this bill, so can put that in the chat. Yeah, welcome any questions that folks have.
Thanks, Simka. And next we'll go to the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Mass with Laura Davis.
Thanks, Becca. Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Davis. I am the policy board chair for the Northeast Organic Farming Association. And we, as an organization, educate and advocate for organic agriculture to expand the availability of healthy food and healthy soil. Obviously, we touch on a lot of these groups here today. Most of our work right now is concentrated on helping farmers transition to organic, helping them with climate smart practices. And also on the education side, we look at biology and soil and help farmers assess their current health of their soils. We have a big food access group too that works with farmers to supply farm shares to the community. And I currently work as a temporary board chair for Massachusetts, but I have also, I sit on the Interstate Council of 7 state NOFA chapters for policy and advocacy. Some of the bills that we are focusing on in this legislative session, obviously the Mass Healthy Soils Program is already passed, but we continue to support that. This is what NOFA is really all about, is healthy soil and healthy food. Our members are made up of not just farmers, but gardeners, landscapers, food activists, homesteaders, and people that like to eat. So we do get involved with a lot of different programs. 2 of our policy focus areas are reducing toxic pesticides in our communities. And so we are supporting the mosquito bill, the school children bill, and restricting rodenticides and many others to protect our kids and families. We also are very involved in working with the PFAS reform bills. We have been working very closely with our brothers and sisters in Maine. We have the luxury of having Rep. Plusher from Maine, who worked on the PFAS bill for that state. And we hear our farmers telling us that they need protection prior to any sludge bans, but we are supporting a ban of sludge on all land in Massachusetts. This would enable us to discontinue the contamination of our areas where we grow food and work and play. We are also supporting the PFAS bill of Sir Hogan, where we're focusing on the reduction of PFAS in specific products. Also, we support many of the pollinator protection bills, which are also pesticide reduction mostly. This is an area that's really important to a lot of our communities. And so this is an area that we have spent a lot of time in educating the public and also legislators about pollinators and how important they are. And we will also have worked on the environmental bond bill to focus on these same areas. And I just want to say that our main focus is protecting healthy soil and food for Massachusetts families. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura. And next we'll go to Nick John with the Mass Farm Bureau Federation.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nick John. I'm the guy with 2 first names, he, him pronouns, and I am the Deputy Director at Massachusetts Farm Bureau Federation. Becca, thank you so much for your work in bringing this group together. Thank you to the previous presenters for your expertise and interest and insight. Truly important and productive. Mass Farm Bureau Federation is a member-based trade association representing agriculture and the interests of our Commonwealth's farmers here in Massachusetts. We have a robust policy development process that begins and ends with our members. Each year, the Farm Bureau counties, we have 12 of them in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, bring forward policy resolutions at their annual meetings. Those policy resolutions are then brought forward, if they're adopted, to our state annual meeting in December and debated and voted on and ranked by the full delegate body, representative of members of all of our 12 counties across the state. So it really is a grassroots process. With regard to the annual budget, Farm Bureau will continue to support and has in the past increased funding for MDAR. Certainly the FSIG and HIP programs are of great value in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We also support disaster relief funding, and we've had a tremendous amount of support from our federal delegation, namely Congressman McGovern, in securing a lot of funding for disaster relief in this part of the country. We also support the governor's commitment to ensure that EEA as an agency makes up and receives funding as 1% of the annual spending bill. And that was the case over the last couple of legislative sessions in the governor's proposal. So a lot of positive support there. For the second session, our legislative policy paper will be representative of all of the agricultural commodity groups across the state, be it dairy, cranberry, fruit and vegetable, nursery and landscaping. There's something on there for everybody. It is in the process of being finalized and will be rolled out at our county legislative breakfast in March, and certainly at the annual Ag Day on Beacon Hill, March 18th, which we're all very much looking forward to. And Farm Bureau, in conjunction with our commodity groups, works every year and with MDAR, works to plan that event and make sure that it is a success. This year, the timing of Ag Day is going to be a little bit challenging. One of the other things that we do is set up legislative meetings to bring the commodity groups and folks to, with the House and Senate Ways and Means chairs, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, the Ag Committee chairs. It's just tough logistically because we're going to have a very short window to set up these meetings. Once the committees are established and the chairs and members are appointed, it is also budget time, as Becca had mentioned. So it's just, for many reasons, going to be a little bit different than it has in years past. That said, we appreciate the opportunity to work with all of you to support your policy positions and legislation and budget asks where we can find common ground. And we really are working to ensure that the voice of agriculture is represented on Beacon Hill. And that is thanks to so much of the work that you folks and your organizations do. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Kelly Coleman, representing the Buy Locals.
Morning, everyone. Working on getting my video. Oh, hello. There we go. Well, thank you again. What I really love about this briefing and what I think Mass Food System Collaborative does really well is bring together partners and organizations that reflect the entire food system, so that you're hearing directly from people working on food access and addressing food insecurity, and also hearing directly from organizations that really focus on the needs of farmers. CISA, Community Involved in Sustaining Agriculture, is one of 9 buy local organizations that work across the state. And our work is to connect farmers with the community, to create opportunities for direct sales between farmers, for shortening the supply chain between farmers and consumers, and using available resources to make sure that that's happening, whether or not you're going through wholesalers and retailers, restaurants, schools, and institutions. So we really are work together to try to create a resilient local food economy that supports local farmers and ensures that our community has access to the fresh local food that we're raising and growing here. Buy local, we have done a food calculator to estimate what would be the impact if we could just shift $5 a month of household budget from purchasing food that was grown or raised outside of the state towards purchasing food that was grown within Massachusetts by local farmers. And sorry, that's $5 a week of your household purchasing, and estimate that that would result in over about 6,500 new jobs within the food economy, over $266 million in benefit to the local economy, and increase the amount of fresh food that we're able to eat by $1.14 billion. So really a lot of win-win-win opportunities by continuing to shorten the supply chain and build connections between our local farmers and our community of people who eat. We fully support many of the initiatives, both the budget asks and the policy asks that you've heard about or that you will hear about in the next couple of slides. And I just want to spend a minute to talk about support for buy local funding, which is support that goes through the Department of Agricultural Resources and provides resources to help organizations with marketing and promotion that raises awareness about local agriculture and farmers, and builds a investment within communities that supports people in choosing to buy local, and also creating an environment where our community member is more aware of the concerns and issues that affect the food system and can bring their voices to the policy around those as well. And so this year, the buy locals come together are asking for $900,000 in the state budget to support this buy local effort across the state. And that will be part of the annual budget cycle. We're also actively engaged in many of the policy partnerships that you've heard about, and looking forward to engaging further in the environmental bond bill, which will provide a lot of important opportunities for investment in the food system. I think I'm done.
Thanks, Kelly. And next we'll hear from Chelsea Gazzillo with the American Farmland Trust.
Hi, everyone. As Becca mentioned, my name is Chelsea Gazzillo, and I'm the Senior New England Policy Manager for American Farmland Trust. I'm actually in the process of transitioning to the American Farmland Trust California team, and will be joining California as a Senior California Policy Manager in April. Please bear with me this morning. I am recovering from a cold. But for those of you that don't know AFT, we are a national organization dedicated to protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land. We have a long history of working on farmland protection and agricultural viability policies, both in New England at the federal level and in Massachusetts. Over the past 5 years, our Massachusetts programming has expanded in depth and breadth to keep farmers on the land. We've done this by improving financial and technical support for farmland, access and transfer, facilitating farmer-led soil health and climate adaptation programs and dialogues, helping urban producers access resources, aiding farmers in implementing more conservation practices, and advocating for farmers and farmland. We were also one of the authors of MDAR's Farmland Action Plan that was released a few years back. So a lot of our priorities this session do focus on asking for additional funding in the upcoming environmental bond. The environmental bond is one of the primary ways that we pay for the APR program, the Agricultural Preservation Restriction Program. So we are asking for funding for APR. We are also asking for funding for the soil health, the Healthy Soils program that NOFA mentioned in the environmental bond, and MDAR's Climate Smart Agricultural program, because all of these programs are a way that we can support farmers to transitioning to better practices, and through the APR program, we can ensure that our farmland remains in agricultural production and that we save it for future generations. So I also want to mention that we are supporting the implementation of the Uniform Partition for Heirs Property Rights Act. Property is a way that anybody can generate generational wealth. And we are working with the Boston College Law Initiative on Land, Housing, and Property Rights. There's a professor there named Dr. Thomas Mitchell, who has been one of the primary authors on what is called the UPHPA. And what this bill does is it puts more steps into our partition law to ensure when a farm property is passed down and there isn't a will, or there's what we call a junk will, that the heirs have a chance to, they have 90 days to go and secure funding to purchase the property from the other heirs if that is what they choose to do. We also, as Nofa mentioned, we are supporting the PFAS bill. We know that PFAS contamination is a threat to the future of our farmland. And we also have been working with some of the advocates in Maine to ensure that we are advocating for a bill that will support relief for farmers who have identified being impacted. Lastly, I will just mention that, well, there's, I guess, 3 more things I want to mention. We are supportive of removing the 5-acre minimum acreage requirements for the Chapter 61A program. Chapter 61A is one of the most utilized programs in the state to keep farms in active agriculture. We've heard continually that the 5-acre requirement has hindered some farmers from being able to enroll in the program. And so we are supportive of removing it. We also are we're exploring to introduce a late file for establishing a down payment assistance program for new beginning and historically marginalized producers that are seeking land, because Massachusetts continues to have some of the most expensive farmland in the country. According to the 2024 National Agricultural Statistics Service Land Values Survey, the average price of farmland per acre in Massachusetts is $14,300. This is a 3.6% increase from 2023. And lastly, we were excited to see the federal delegation across New England go and push Congress at the end of the last Congress in December to allocate $220 million in climate disaster relief assistance to producers in New England, Hawaii, and Alaska. And so far, it's already been estimated that there were $300 million in New England alone for this funding. So this funding is going to be allocated through a block grant that state departments of agriculture will be helping to administer. In addition to giving credit to McGovern, I also want to give a shout out to our friends in Connecticut. There was a very determined farmer named Willie Della Camara that got on his tractor and drove all the way from North Branford to DC to meet with the Connecticut delegation to get this funding after he lost everything in 2024 to a hailstorm. So I, really want to give credit to him and just say that it can take a really determined individual, or a really determined individual can make change. And so, yeah, we're really excited to see that coming through. Thanks, Becca.
Thanks, Chelsea. Just for time's sake, Rob Johnson from the Mass Land Trust Coalition was unable to make it today, but we will be sending out the slides, don't worry, and this will be included in the deck. So I just wanted to mention that, without a land base, we really lack the ability to have a local food system. So the 140 plus land trusts that make up the Land Coalition do really important work. And these priorities from the coalition will be included in the deck. All right. I know we're very close to the hour, so I just want to invite folks to, in the chat, add one thing that you heard from a presenter today that you're really excited about. I know that folks have to jump to another meeting, but I appreciate everyone's time, so I'll just go through our priorities at the collaborative very quickly. As folks know, we were established after the creation of the Local Food Action Plan way back in 2015 to further a sustainable, equitable, resilient, and local and connected local food system. We do that through advocacy campaigns and policy change at the state level. So we have 9 priority bills this session. 8 of them are refiles, which I'll talk through briefly, but I really want to highlight the new one, which is an act relative to urban farmland, which we work with Pat Duffy and Senator Adam Gomez to introduce in the Senate, which would support the conversion of vacant lots and underutilized land in environmental justice communities into urban farms and community gardens. MDAR's urban grant program has allowed 2 urban farms to purchase land in urban areas or suburban areas in one case. And we really think this is a really important initiative, and we really want to see it expanded further. We know municipal capacity is limited, so funding is really important for that. And the creation of urban farms and gardens is really important for climate and heat resilience, economic development, food security, a number of reasons that I think folks on this call understand. So that's our new bill, and we're really excited about it. And then our 8 bills that are mostly refiles with some edits are an act to promote food literacy, as folks know. That would add food literacy concepts like food justice and agriculture to the standards that DESE, the curriculum frameworks that DESE works on and revises every roughly 5 years for most of them. An act encouraging the donation of food to persons in need would provide liability protection, as well as a up to $25,000 tax credit for farmers and businesses that donate food. Right now, many farmers are actually donating food. They just are taking on the cost without any reimbursement. So this would really help those farmers that are already trying to provide food for their communities. An act promoting equity in agriculture would establish a special commission to look at racial equity in Massachusetts agriculture. Right now, about 3% of farmers on Massachusetts farms are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, whereas about 32%, I believe, of the Massachusetts residential population identifies as BIPOC. So that's not great, and we really want to establish this commission to look at what's going on in Massachusetts agriculture and make recommendations to reduce those inequities. An act relative to an agricultural healthy incentives program is our HIP enabling bill. It would just put the program in statute for its long-term sustainability. Laura and Chelsea mentioned the PFAS bill, which would establish a trust fund to assist farmers in case there was any reason for them to pause their operations and producing food, as well as banning the application of what's called municipal sludge or biosolids on land in Massachusetts, so that we stop the contamination at its source. An act fostering agricultural resilience in Massachusetts, also known as our state farm bill, is an omnibus bill. It has about 20 different pieces in it, including asking the MEMA, the Emergency Management Agency, to create a plan to address food system issues when there are emergencies, creating the Next Generation Farmer Fund, giving MDAR the right of first refusal when agricultural properties come up for sale, adding members to the UMass Extension Board of Public Overseers, and directing the Executive Office of Health and Human Services to conduct a study to gather information on state social safety net programs available to farmers. Again, there are like 20 different provisions on this bill. We will have a one-pager on it soon that goes into more depth. An act supporting the Commonwealth's food system would establish a state food system coordinator for the Massachusetts Food Policy Council. We really want to see expanded capacity for that body. And then last but not least is our constitutional amendment that Laura mentioned earlier that would remove the 5-acre minimum to qualify ag land for the agricultural tax rate. This is a slightly different process than most bills go through, and is really important so that all farms of all sizes, this affects rural farmers, suburban farmers, and some urban commercial farmers, can qualify for that tax rate. So those are our, in very brief, 9 bills. And then of course our budget items. The Healthy Incentives Program, we run the campaign for HIP funding and have for many years. We'll have a lobby day on March 13th that we hope to see folks at the State House. And we'll be asking for $25 million in the budget, as well as supplemental funding. Unfortunately, as I think many folks on this call know, the HIP faced in at least 50% cut to benefits starting in December of 2024. So we're trying to get about $7.5 million of supplemental funding to close the gap this year and restore the benefit levels to what they were previously to December 1st, 2024. We'll continue to advocate for FSIG. There's an asterisk there because we believe that it's going to be moved to the governor's capital budget moving forward. So the advocacy will change a little bit, but we'll still be advocating for that program. We will also continue to advocate for the reinstatement of the Local Food Policy Council grant program. As Alexis mentioned, there were some line item cuts that the governor did during the last budget cycle that included the Mass Food Trust and cutting the Local Food Policy Council grant program entirely. So we'll try and reinstate that this year. And then, as many of my co-presenters have mentioned, we are all going to be advocating for an environmental bond bill. This comes around once every roughly 5 years. It's an opportunity for the state to do both reauthorizing funding for capital programs like a lot of MDAR's grant programs and to do some policy changes. So we'll be talking more about that, I think, likely in a separate briefing at some point. And that process is likely to kick off in May or June when the governor introduces her bond bill for the legislature to take up. So I recognize we're over the hour and I appreciate 54 folks staying on the call. But briefly, I just want to talk about next steps. So right now is really an important time to get state representatives and senators to co-sponsor some of the bills that you heard today. So if any of these bills are important to you, your farm, your organization, your community, we would ask you to reach out to your state rep and senator to ask them to co-sponsor these bills. And I have templates that I will put in the chat very soon. And a lot of my co-presenters have put in their emails into the chat as well. And we would ask that, folks either sign up for their newsletter, sign up for their advocacy campaign list, stay involved, and folks will be sharing more information about budget campaigns soon. So those are some next steps. Definitely reach out to your state rep and senator. It's really important. So I do know that we are over the hour, but if folks are able to stay on, we can take like maybe one question and I'll stop sharing my screen. And if folks want to come off mute, you can use the raise your hand function, or if you want to put the question in the chat, feel free to put the question in the chat. And we will send out the templates and the slide deck to everyone who registered for this briefing. So please don't worry about getting the materials. I will send them out later today. All right, seeing no questions, if anyone wants to come off mute and say something that you're excited to advocate for, that's also welcome.
Well, I learned so much in these calls. I know I focus on the food security side of it, but I'm just incredibly impressed with all the work people are doing on every level to protect our farmland, to just expand what we can do to produce our own crops in Massachusetts in environmental and safe way. So I just want to say how impressed I am with everybody and everything that was shared. And hats off to you guys, to Becca and Christina, for making this forum possible. So.
Yeah, I will second that. And Becca, thank you so much. And I think the more that we can bring together the anti-hunger advocates and the farm and farmland advocates into a single coalition, I think it will be unstoppable. So I really appreciate learning about all the farm and farmland issues that are happening.
I was going to mention that Rep. James Arena DeRosa was on the call. For those of you who don't know him, he was the regional administrator under the Obama administration at USDA, but he also was connected with the Arena Farms. And he's someone who gets these issues, which is wonderful, as well as Rep. Kane and Senator Comerford and others.
And Rep. Arena DeRosa, I didn't say this, I should have, is the lead sponsor on the Ag PFAS bill this session, and we appreciate his work leading that bill, as well as the bill that Pat mentioned with the study on DTA's. I'm not going to say it right, Pat. You can probably describe it.
Just making sure we have, enough administrative staffing to be able to pull down all the federal dollars we can. And it's very worrisome to see the increase in demand on the food banks. Frankly, I think that is directly related both to the immigrant fears. People are pulling out of benefits for which they're eligible, and second, on the difficulty they have getting DTA benefits. So yeah, we want to tackle that, but just pulling federal dollars into the state is what that bill's all about.
I see Megan's question in the chat, and I want to shout out the work at the Food Bank of Western Mass, Worcester County Food Bank, and Greater Boston Food Bank. And I think that each one of you has your own networks of food pantries that do engage on advocacy. I've spoken to the Food Bank of Western Mass's network a couple times about the bills and how to get involved with the budget campaigns as well. So if you folks want to talk about that further.
Becca, have you seen in the governor's budget the funding levels for Mass Food Trust and Food Policy Council grants, if anything?
So the governor's budget never includes what are called earmarks. They're like specific little chunks within a larger line item. So she doesn't typically fund the Mass Food Trust admin or the local food policy council grants. That's something the legislature does. It's just that last year, after the legislature passed the budget as a way of they're called line item vetoes, she decided to do some of them to balance the budget in her view. So that's why that happened.
Got it. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I am Ben Thomas. I'm the new director at Boston Children's Hospital working on state government relations, and we are so grateful to be in this space. Food insecurity was identified as a top priority within our listing session process with our providers and frontline staff and families in the fall. And we're just excited to go to bat for the HIP program and also to be a resource in bringing the children's health perspective and the muscle as much as we have to this important work in supporting farmers and our local food system. So just grateful for you all and the work that you do every day.
Thanks, Ben. It's great to see you again. Great. Anyone else? This is a very friendly group in case anyone wants to come off mute who hasn't yet.
I can briefly answer the question about food pantries working with the legislation. I would say any food pantry who wants to be involved should do that. Anybody who's in the Western Mass area can reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you with all of our initiatives, and I know that anybody in the Greater Boston area should reach out to Kate Adams. You know, I think one of the most important things that we can bring in our advocacy is stories about how food and hunger are impacting people. And so, you know, the people at agencies see that directly. And, you know, the more that you can share those stories anonymously, you know, nobody has to give their name, but just to really personalize what we're seeing is incredibly helpful. And put my email in there too.
Great. And I did just put in our template for co-sponsorship requests. It is specific to the collaborative's 9 priority bills, but you should feel free to adapt it to other bills that you want to support related to the food system or beyond. I know there are a number of important issues like transportation that intersect with the food system. So feel free to use it to your own interests. And I do just want to say, since it is 13 minutes past the hour, maybe we should wrap up. If anyone has any last comments or questions, speak now or hold it until our next briefing, please. All right. Great to see everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your day.